All right, you're still watching Good Morning Nigeria. And to begin the second part of our conversation on the subject matter, stemming the tide of insecurity in Nigeria, here is a summary of the discussion we had yesterday as packaged by Joseph Hussein.
You see police parading criminals with so many arms, and then we want to know these arms, where are they at the moment? We also want to know, look at customs. They will tell you at the border, we have cache of arms coming from other countries, they display it. Now we want to know, where are they? So, because let it not get back to the hands of the criminals. And then the federal government must work seriously to make sure that we give up our border security.
Even at the community level, there are ways of punishing criminals. But it appears they have taken over the public space, and now they overrun police stations at ease and hit and go back. And then the public gets so excited about it that they start flashing these things on social media as if it's some good news. I think the Nigerian public must be more patriotic than what we're doing now.
We need to realize that security is not cheap. To go technological, as General Temblong has suggested, we must be ready to pay for it, and we must encourage our citizens. We must give security awareness and education to everybody.
The IG has directed that even all the men in the state headquarters and in the federal headquarters should be downsized. So that we need more men, more boots on the streets, patrolling, because we are trying to do. We have come up with a robust way of a patrol where we want to employ every known part of patrolling that has been discarded. That's foot patrol, vehicular patrol, even bicycle patrol. So that we're trying to create this awareness of visibility policing, because there is assurance and there is this sense of security when you see a policeman.
All right, many thanks, Joseph Hussein, there for the excerpts from part one of our conversation, which took place yesterday, Wednesday. We have guests with us here in the studios now to further elaborate on matters arising and also get their own perspectives on what needs to be done to arrest the current level of insecurity in the country. We have Group Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu. He's retired. He's a security and defense consultant and an expert in the Safe School Declaration. Group Captain Sadiq, delight to have you again on Good Morning Nigeria.
Good morning, viewers.
All right. Also here with us in the studios is a member of the House of Representatives, Honorable Bamidele Salami. Honorable Salami, delight to have you with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
And of course, Dr. Joseph Ochogu, Associate Research Professor, Head Research and Policy Analysis, Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, is here with us this morning. Good morning, sir, and welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning.
And of course, Habila Joshak is a retired Deputy Inspector General Operations of the Nigerian Police Force. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you for having me.
All right, gentlemen, I'd like to have you join us. Let's begin with DIG Habila Joshak. DIG, I recall last year, on the heels of the NSAS protests, we had you as our guests, as we always get you from time to time when you oblige our request for you to participate in our conversation. One of the things that the nation witnessed during the NSAS protests, after it was hijacked by hoodlums, was attack on police stations, an attack on service personnel, some of whom were killed, in some parts of the country. And then, of course, those incidents died down. But in recent weeks, we have seen what has been happening, particularly in the southeast of the country. Anambra, all the states of the southeast, Anambra, Enugu, Imo, Abia, and Ebonyi. Service personnel are being attacked and killed. Service assets are also being attacked and razed. What, in your opinion, is playing out? I mean, we've had incidents of jailbreaks as well, even though there was an attempt in Kano, which was also stopped. What is happening? Are policemen now endangered? Should we be concerned? Or, as some analysts have indicated, is this a prelude to further weakening the security system, and then the hoodlums and bandits would then have a field day thereafter?
Well, thank you so much. What is playing out, as we've seen, could be summarized as some unpatriotic Nigerians that have already they've written a script, they've also rehearsed, and they're trying to play out. The motive not known. And I think also that these people have at the back of their mind the agenda for trying to destabilize this country. Because one of the things that you would do to take control of whatever situation you want to play out is going after the lead agency for the internal security and also creating fear and apprehension. So what is being played out is some individuals that are very unpatriotic, whatever motive it is, I think it's known to them. They have an agenda. They've also had their purpose for doing what they are doing. And they seem to have studied that, and that's why I'm saying they've written a script. And they've rehearsed, and they're now trying to play it out. Because when you dampen the morale of the internal security apparatus as the police, you are trying to create a situation of insecurity and dampen people's morale, and then take the laws into your hands by getting on straight on the police, those who are meant, to protect the citizen, taking up on them, trying to dampen their morale, just mow them down, and then go again to release criminals that have been brought in, and criminals that were supposed to process through the justice system. So I think what is being played out is a very serious one, and the earlier, the better, that we have to fish this individual, know their motive, and get them and catch them.
All right, thank you. Let's turn to Group Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu, who is a Security and Defense Consultant and expert in Safe School Declaration. So, in discussing the issue of insecurity in Nigeria as it is presently, we also know that the spate of kidnapping in schools has also risen to a point where Nigerians are beginning to ask many questions as to why that has persisted, especially in the northwest part of the country. What, in your opinion, has gotten this insecurity in school to the level we are now? And as an expert, what do you think could be done presently to stem the tide of the kidnapping in our schools? We just read in the newspaper how one of the abducted ladies who was killed, was buried yesterday in Kaduna State, and of course there are many more students who are in the hands of hoodlums in many parts of this country. What can be done? What steps can be taken this time around to address the issue of kidnapping in the nation's schools?
Oh, thank you very much. First, schools are attractive to kidnappers because they typify what we call soft target. Usually, schools have very light security, so it is easy for a bandit or a kidnapper to walk in and carry the children, because generally our schools are not well guarded or not well secured, as opposed to what obtains in other countries. When the Chibok girls' kidnapping happened, because of the international uproar, there was immediate response, both from Nigeria and international community, through the Safe School Initiative. But unfortunately, as it happens in our national life, immediately an incident happens, there's a flurry of activities. But when it recedes with no media attention, then everybody went to sleep. The Safe School Initiative, started by Nigerian government, of course, with the support from the former Prime Minister of UK, Gordon Brown, who was the UN ambassador for education or something like that. Everybody went to sleep. Nothing was done until we had Dapchi, until we have too many now. Now, well, again, it seems obviously we have woken up from our slumber. 2 weeks ago, I think the Ministry of Finance organized a stakeholders meeting on how to see to finance the safe schools initiative and reinvigorate it. Apart from that, even after the safe school, when I think Mr. Gordon Brown saw that there was no any response from the national authorities, there have been other efforts. Like in 2019, Nigeria signed the Safe School Declaration, which was adopted at the Federal Executive Council meeting. By that Safe School Declaration, there are certain things that Nigeria as a country is supposed to do. There are certain guidelines. There are certain training that will be done to our security forces. There are even steps that schools, local government, local communities should take. Now, that again was another initiative different from the Safe School initiative. Again, here I have to underline this because there is tendency to start too many things at once without coordination. So maybe the government should look at, bringing together the SSI, which is basically driven by private sector, and then the Safe School Declaration, which Nigeria has committed itself to following. We hope, it's a whole of community approach. The Safe School Declaration and the guidelines is not only for the security agencies, school management bodies, PTAs, ministries of education, universal basic education boards, all have a role to play. Interestingly also, a document or a manual for training of security agencies on how they will protect schools, on how security agencies should behave around schools was promulgated. I think the document is been in the process of being validated by the Ministry of Education and Ministry. But in all these instances, you see so many moving parts. There is the need to bring these things together and align them. Again, like I said, it's a whole of community approach. It's not only government. Even as a parent, I always wonder how many parents take time now to go to school, especially those ones that pay a lot of money in private schools. Do you go and ask in the school, headmaster or principal, please, what is the security plan you have in your school? What happens if there is a kidnap? How does my child, nobody asks that. So these are things that everybody from the government to the community, there's a role to play. But most importantly, I want us to align all the national effort to protect our children, which I believe are our greatest assets that we have. If we don't have safety in our schools, especially in areas like in the north, where already, even without these problems, school enrollment is very low. We are trying to make, parents to send their children to school. This will be a great setback. And then the future of our children is the future of the country, because these are our future leaders. If we cannot secure them to have education, it is going to tell on us down the line many years to come. That's what I have to say on that.
All right. Thank you, Group Captain Sadiq. We'll bring you back into the conversation presently. Now, let's also get the views of Dr. Joseph Ochogu, who is of the Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Dr. Ochogu, what is your reading of what is happening in the country? The Northeast, we've been battling for over a decade now with terror, and of course Boko Haram typifies that, along with the breakaway faction. In the Northwest, we have seen the steady rise of bandits and kidnapping for ransom. That's also playing out in parts of North Central, where you also have high incidents of conflicts arising from the often antagonistic relationship these days between farmers and herders. In the Southwest, we also have such incidents in South-South, and then in the Southeast, you are having the separatist agitation. So, all of this, when you look at the end result that we've been harvesting in recent weeks, it's just a stream of blood everywhere around the country. What is your reading of what is happening before we start getting into, say, look, how do we begin to profile solutions from your point of view?
Thank you very much. And it is important to start on the premise that what we're experiencing now just didn't happen. Just didn't happen in the sense that the foundation upon which we've been building on, for a very long time has been the foundation that is embedded, and with all the likelihood to breed violence. So the point is that if you look at the anatomy of violence in Nigeria, you discover that there are a lot of structural fault line that tends to promote violence at every level in our society. And when you look at issues of injustice, when you look at issues of corruption, when you look at issue of poor service delivery, when you look at the issue of discrimination, the poor management of diversity, those are things that propel violence in any society. And like I tell a lot of people, it is not just about dropping money, in this whole thing, to correct some of these things. What we need as a quick run, basically, is more of intelligence and governance. And governance is not about contracting. Governance is more about deep thinking, creative and innovative thinking, and deploying the right action, to nip in the bud some of these things. So if you look at the violence that we are talking about, across the country, violence is liberalized. If you talk about cultism, if you talk about gangs group and all kinds of group, the high level of violence from Boko Haram to the so-called bandits that are associated with terrorism and all that. And note that these violence actors too, they have the international dimensions. And that is why you have, for example, transnational organized crimes and global organized terrorist groups and all that through selling their ideas and all that. So our Nigerian environment does provide, it's a very fragile, the fragility and the vulnerability of our environment, provides space, for this nature of violence to thrive. So, but what do we do, to curtail these things? Since 1999 till date, there have been a lot of socialization along the violence line, socialization of the Nigerian populace in different parts of the country, in terms of one, from political violence to social violence and then cultural violence. So what do? We need the process of desocialization. It is not just all about putting the hard boots in the hard ground, to correct some of these things. Because even right within some of these institutions too, there are some violence, that takes place there. And when we say violence, at times it's not violence because you've seen blood, coming out from somebody. When you discriminate against somebody at the level of promotion, when you discriminate against somebody at the level of entrance into school, what you are perpetuating is violence against that individual. And you are likely to socialize that person to take a deviant attitude towards society. And you see all these things cutting across the nooks and crannies of the country. And if you look at economic violence, for example, the increasing gap between the rich and the poor is completely unacceptable. It is not acceptable in any society. And there is no society that experiences high gap, increased gap, between the rich and the poor. And then you expect some level of peace to reign in that society. So you begin to look at dealing with this thing. It has to take a holistic approach. It is not just about the security forces that are already getting tired. If you look at the population of Nigeria, vis-a-vis our armed forces and our security forces and all that, you know that this is the time for us to be more creative, more innovative on how to deal with the problems that we have. Politically, economically, socially. We just have to own up now and then come to agree to terms that, we want Nigeria as a country, to be one, and then change the way we used to do things before and begin to do things new, afresh. We need to breathe in fresh air, into the toxic environment and then change the landscape. Else, other actors are going to take advantage and will be experiencing some of the things we're experiencing now, if not worse. So we need to take the bull by the horn now and then to create a whole of government and a whole of citizens approach, to deal with this problem. It is not government alone, it's all of government, all of citizens approach, working collaboratively, to change the tides of what we are currently experiencing.
Yeah, thank you so much. He has raised a very valid point, from this your submission in what you refer to as the anatomy of violence in Nigeria. We talked about injustice, corruption, discrimination, increased gap between the rich and the poor, which is very, 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 very germane to this conversation. Member House of Reps, Honorable Bamidele Salami, a number of times National Assembly did invite some leaders of security agencies in Nigeria, perhaps to understand what they are doing with respect to the situation in the country. We want to hear from you. What are you hearing from such personnel? And in your opinion, as a politician, because of all that we've heard from Joseph Ochogo, tilts towards the fact that most of the issues in question that may have culminated into the situation we have in this country were caused by politicians. No doubt about that, because they are the people in governance. They are the people in governance. And no doubt about the fact that when it comes to the issue of increased gap between the rich and the poor, we still lay blames on politicians. Who are the policy makers? Who are the policy implementers? So I wanted to have an overview of the situation in Nigeria and give us your own perception of what you think is happening, and of course, what is coming from the National Assembly with respect to addressing the issue.
Well, thank you very much. Let me, start off by agreeing very substantially with the point you have made and what the last speaker also said, to the fact that, where you have degeneration in any of the structures of society, the blame must principally go to those in government. We are government, so we must take the responsibility, because governance is about solving problems. So if there are problems, then the government should take the lead in solving the problem. And, as an institution, the House of Representatives, as a law-making organ of government, is not shying away from this fact that we are elected to solve problems. And it is so obvious that today in Nigeria, we have never had it so bad. We have never had things turn so low, and we have never had a situation where, you have incidents of insecurity and violence in virtually every part of the country. It used to be situated in the northeastern part of the country, the major challenges we had. But today, virtually everywhere, has one problem or the other. And if you have studied the pattern of our deliberations in the House in the last 2 years, the 9th Assembly, you discover that over 70% of what we talk about or do there is about security, which is an indication that we are not, oblivious of the fact that this is a major challenge to good governance, to the peace and prosperity of the country. The Nigerian Constitution says the security and welfare of the people shall be the primary responsibility of government. So even though the executive arm of government has the larger responsibility of implementing whatever comes as in form of lawmaking, resolutions, and what have you, we decided on our own that at every point in time, because we feel the pain, we are representing various constituencies. Each time you go home, people come up with, with their agitations, with their complaints. You can also feel that our people can no longer go about their normal. So because of that, most of what we had done in the last 2 years have been on security. Like you said also in your introductory remarks, we have had occasions to invite service chiefs, especially the outgoing service chiefs, and the National Security Advisor to brief us on the state of insecurity in Nigeria and why it appears that government, looks so helpless in this situation. Now, some of the things that can be said, on air about the problems we have one, we have problems of inadequacy of manpower. We have problems of inadequacy of the equipment, those things that we really need to tackle insecurity. And because of that, the National Assembly decided that we should do more in terms of budgetary provision to the various security agencies. But again, it is not the equipment and the manpower that will do the job wholly. We have to have a commitment of all the stakeholders to a process of nipping this in the bud. And that is why a few days ago, on Tuesday in particular, when we had our first session after resuming from the break, we dedicated the whole day to discussing the state of insecurity in Nigeria and came up with a 12-point resolution as, the minimum requirement that government, both at the executive and legislative arm, have to work towards in ensuring that we combat it. Because if we don't combat this within the earliest possible time, God forbid, anything can happen. And the key point of it, which is also drawing from what the earlier speaker said, is that there is a need for engagement. There is a very, very urgent need for engagement. We have called on the president himself to initiate the process of engagement with critical stakeholders in Nigeria. There are bottled up anger, bottled up emotions. There are issues that are, they may not have started now, but they are being exacerbated by so many other factors. The House of Representatives is convening a summit, a national security summit, of which a 45-member committee has been set up to engage with critical stakeholders in the security architecture, traditional rulers, community leaders, religious leaders, and we have set that process in motion. That committee was inaugurated by Mr. Speaker yesterday. But like I said, beyond that, we also believe that the president needs to declare a state of emergency on the security situation of the country. What does this mean? It means that everyone in leadership position agree that this becomes a priority above every other thing. Enough of all this talk about 2023 elections and what have you. We are so distracted with so many things in this country. If there is no livelihood, if there is no peace anywhere, nobody can talk about election. You can't talk about development. People who are even mobilized to go and construct roads are being kidnapped and killed everywhere. They are part of the country today that if you put 10 billion naira on the contract, nobody will take it because they are not secured. So we are asking that the president should declare a state of emergency so that we first of all agree that this is an issue that must be frontally tackled. Devote more resources, devote more attention, devote more activities, engagement with all critical stakeholders to find out what, now these people who are kidnapping and engaged in banditry and every other crime are not ghosts. They are known in various communities. How did we get here? The problem that we refused to solve 10, 15 years ago are rearing their heads together. What happens tomorrow? Now, I was just saying before we came in the studio, even in Abuja today, when you drive around, I drove around yesterday night, you could see young boys on the street, begging for money, all these almajiris and beggars. These are the problems of another 10 years. They are about 8, 9 years old today. In 10 years' time, they are 19 years old. They are not in school. What will they be doing in the next 10 years when they will be 19 years old if they don't go to school today? 13.5 million children out of school in Nigeria, the highest in the world. Now, these are all the problems that we must collectively address as leaders of this country, and as an institution, we are taking the lead in this regard. We have decided that we're going to hold this summit. It will be a 4-day summit that will be holding in the month of May, but the process has been set in motion. We have got the buy-in of the executive arm of government, and we are getting the buy-in of security experts and critical stakeholders in all these, firmament that we need to garner public opinion, to garner thought, strategies, and ideas on how to tackle this problem.
Very well said, Honorable Bamidele Salami. You've summarized the measures being taken by the National Assembly, in particular the House of Representatives. I was just wondering, before we get to the issue of the Security Summit, let's deal with the issue of a resolution calling for a state of emergency on security. The honorable members probably consider the wider implications of a state of emergency. Because in law and constitutionally, when you declare a state of emergency, this will require extraordinary measures.
Absolutely.
And in the 8th, was it the 8th or 7th now? But Goodluck Jonathan was the 7th assembly. At some point, when there was a call again for the reimposition of a state of emergency on the Northeast to further help in prosecuting the war, the National Assembly shut it down. So what are we asking for now? That's through the House of Representatives, to say declare a state of emergency. It's not just a label, as you very well know.
Thank you.
So what is it that we'll be looking at? And with the citizens already traumatized, be willing, to comply and then to support such a state of emergency for a beneficial outcome?
Well, very good question. You see, when we talk about having a state of emergency on any issue, not necessarily security, just security now, because that is the burning point that we have as a country. We're talking about a situation that allows for extraordinary measures, extraordinary deployment of resources, of personnel and measures. Now, you gave an example of Goodluck Jonathan declaring the state of emergency in the northeastern part of the country, even though it did not totally solve the problem. Don't forget that by the time we were having our elections in 2015, we were able to hold elections in virtually every part of Nigeria, because then the government had the liberty to employ strategies out of the conventional to tackle the problem and restore peace and order in several parts of the northeastern part of the country. Now, before now, when we talk about state of emergency, there is an idea that, maybe it will involve removing governors, removing local government chairmen and whatever. Now, it's been stated and it's been confirmed that those will be extra constitutional issues. Now, it will be unconstitutional that because you declare a state of emergency, you remove a governor, because the Nigerian Constitution has given specific means through which a governor can be removed from office, and that does not include in a declaration of a state of emergency, because even by the provision of our law, a governor can request the president to declare a state of emergency in his state if there is a great threat to to law and order. So we are expecting a situation where it will bring this issue to the front burner of all our actions, policies, and programs, even if it is for the space of 6 months. And let me assure you that the people who are in Zamfara today, who cannot stay in their homes, the people in Benue who are in the IDPs and they are being attacked even in the IDPs, will not mind going the extra mile, to lose some comfort, so to say, if that will allow government to be able to come in, recruit more personnel, even if it is on an emergency basis, including seeking support from friendly countries of the world. There is nothing that stops us from seeking the support of mercenaries, for example, if that will help us in fighting the war. If we are able to nip this in the bud in 6 states of the Federation, I'm telling you, we will have achieved a great deal in helping with those other states where we don't have such a terrible program. Now, so those are the things that we have in mind. We will call on the president to declare a state of emergency so that all attention, all effort, all programs and policies of government can be devoted to confronting this problem, because that is the primary function of government.
Honorable Kira, let me just mention this, and then you pop it. Good explanation you have provided. But, that's why the other leg of it, you touched on it briefly, that say Zamfara, they wouldn't mind to lose some comfort,
yes,
to enable them, have a more peaceable environment. But extraordinary measures, if you were to impose a state of emergency, Nigeria experienced a state of emergency, the entire country, from 1967 until 1978. The state of emergency was declared on account of the Civil War, which was first a police action in the present area of Cross River, and then went on, but the state of emergency lasted for 11 years. It's not just personal comfort. I mean, as lawyers will tell you, some of those so-called frustration cases in contract, the requisition. The government will say, yes, we need your building to be able to do X, Y, Z. We need your property. We need your assets to be able to do X, Y, Z. So are these the kind of things that Nigerian citizens are willing, to, I don't know. That's what I say it depends on the extent. Kirian, you get the point I'm making?
Yes. And that's why I was going to ask Habila Joshak to come in here, because it's not just, it's easy to declare a state of emergency, but there are things that go with it, in terms of the, operation of state of emergency, because when you declare state of emergency, there must be action. All right. So we are talking about bandits. We are talking about Boko Haram. We are talking about kidnappers. These are individuals who are residing in forests and coming out to towns to carry out operations at will, and most times they are succeeding. All right. Because not less than 1,000 Nigerians may be found in different forests, being held by different abductors. So, sir, in the case of a state of emergency, what are we expecting? You're a retired Deputy Inspector General of Police, what is expected of the security operatives in any situation of, if it's declared that, okay, now the government has declared state of emergency on insecurity, what should be the first step to be taken to address the issue?
Yes, the Honorable have pointed out that, but I would love to make an adjustment to say that we should securitize. We should securitize security. That means bringing security to the front burner of all other activities. not waiting for administrative procedure before you take action to begin to tackle. When you securitize, then you take a political decision, whatever the head of that of that assignment says stand. And it also means that you just have to take this decision without looking at the administrative procedure. Otherwise, that particular incident, that particular thing that is happening will consume everyone. And so I think securitization theory here will replace the state of emergency. In that way, government will be able to take decisions without going through the necessary procedure. What I know is that whether it is the military or the police or any other security operative, the complaint has been that there has been no sufficient logistics equipment. There are no funds. And to some extent, the manpower in all the services, whether the military or the police or the civil defense or those responsible for gathering intelligence, are not enough. And if they are, there are no sufficient funds. And that has been the problem, and that has been the reason. You could see that if we have sufficient funding, if there's sufficient funding for the services, and then you securitize security, this incident of kidnapping, incident of attack on security agencies, they've attacked the police, they've attacked the military for no just cause, and because the police and other security agency for internal security represent that organ that try to fulfill one of the constitutional obligation of government to say that security and welfare, that security in that state is for the police. And that's why the police are trained. They are not trained to kill. Police are trained to protect. And where there are incidents, police are not supposed to open fire on those who are harming anyone. They said there are procedures for police officers to begin to use their firearms. And one of it is that if the life of one particular individual in the country is in danger, and there's no other way that you can prevent that man from being killed, then you can fire. Or if you yourself have assessed the situation and discovered that the attack that is on you, there's no other way you can protect yourself, that's when you fire. And that's why police officer would not just see people armed and you just open fire on them. And that particular thing, or that particular directive, has made criminals to begin to open fire.
So what I was actually emergency is declared. Our security operatives going to move into Nigerian forests and begin to attack? Because, see, we are talking about individuals who are existing in forests, who have bases well established, who have supply chain, their administration and they have very superior firepower. I'm talking about where Nigerian, the military, the police will say, look, they find it is total war declared on these people and move into the forest.
I was just wondering, Kirian,
yes.
let me latch on to what Kirian is just asking as an example, because this is part of what Nigerians experience every day.
Yes.
When you are having off-cycle elections or even general elections, we read reports of tens of thousands of policemen who have been deployed to Osun, to Ekiti, to Edo, to Anambra, to go and police elections. Amongst them, you will also hear reports of hooded security personnel. Now they say no more hooded security personnel. They go there for purposes of elections. Why is it a challenge to replicate such proliferation of security personnel in the so-called forest, which is Guinea Savannah, in the northern part of the country?
Well, that is a very good opinion. But like I said, you talk about the handling of cycle election. I think in most of it, I think I did 90% of that. I also was responsible. My Inspector General of Police had the opportunity of being allowed to coordinate all other security agencies, all those that involve in election, and I lead. And we had a lot of them where we discovered that it's an off-cycle election. You have to pump in the men, and it worked. What I'm saying now, yes, state of emergency. You cannot go into the forest to begin to camp. You must equip the men very well. You must also assess the men and make sure that they are adequate. There are no logistics. The military, I have interacted severally, while I was serving, and even when I'm out of service, I know they want equipment. They want equipment and more personnel. And if you have that, then you can also, and that's why I'm saying, when you say state of emergency, unless we break them down, but I know that we will be very comfortable with what we call securitization, bringing this insecurity to the front burner, everybody thinking about it, and dropping some of the procedure that you would have gone through to be able to tackle this. And that means that you can, of course, go where you think these people are and bring them down. And like I said, when you want to ensure security of a country, there must be what we call patriotism and nationalism. And that means that people must believe in what is happening. And people must also say what they see. Because like I said, if you observe, nobody just get up and just call people in 1 minute and go into, to do what they're doing. There are plannings some people have seen, but because some people are not patriotic, they won't let that go. And so there are factors. I am not really disagreeing that you can do state of emergency, but I'm saying that right now, we need more logistics. We need to come together to make sure that we bring in sufficient manpower. The military have said that. The security agencies for the internal security have said that. But if you declare state of emergency, why do you have the equipment, the armored personnel carriers, some of these equipments that will enable you go into the forest to begin to come, because we know where they are, right out here now.
Well, DIG Habila Joshak, thank you very much. But there are parts of our questions that are still hanging. We'll give you the opportunity to respond to them presently. I'm just wondering, Dr. Joseph Ochogo. Dr. Joseph Ochogo, I know that you already talked about the anatomy of violence in Nigeria, and therefore that this is not strictly a matter that you would expect security action solely to solve. But we are still on the security aspect now. And there are some examples that we have cited and some of the responses by the other guests. What's your take on this security perspective on dealing with the insecurity in the country before we return to the social aspect that you very expertly analyzed?
I think it's important to state that you can't deal with issues of security in isolation of governance. And I'm just going to cite a very quick example of, if you look at the kind of threat that we face, obviously, and the rapidity and the mobility, of these rogue actors, in our midst. For example, what is their convenient means of transportation? Their convenient means of transportation is motorcycle. And you now discover that motorcycle is a major security threat in terms of that is the enabler. That is the thing that gives them rapid mobility ahead of our forces. So what do you do? Is to perhaps change the transportation system, in urban areas and certain areas, and even parts of rural areas, and ban motorcycle. You ban motorcycle, and if individuals are going to own motorcycle, they are licensed. You have the identities of the owners and all that. They have plate numbers that you see. But we don't have that. The motorcycles that enable these people move from one part of the country or forest to the other, and even those that operate even in urban areas, look at them carefully. You don't even have a plate numbers. The identities of the riders you don't even know. And they are all over the country. So the governance component is to begin to regulate this aspect in terms of the movement of motorcycle, motorbikes, and their owners, because they have owners. But if you don't do that, and you are emotional about it, or because certain issues around it, you don't want to deal with it, then this thing predominates. Because if you just move to the outskirts of Abuja, for example, you just begin to see motorbikes. Watch carefully, there is no plate number. The person doesn't have an identity, and they are even on the highways. Now in Abuja, if you are going to the airport, So these are quick wins that we need to buy into. On the issue of emergency in the security...
Sorry, while you are still on this, just to illustrate, Kieran, you're talking about governance. Growing up as children, we knew that your bicycle had to have a license.
Exactly.
It was a thing that it was described, and you had to renew it every year.
That's right.
And then a dog also has to have a collar with a license.
That's right.
So what happened? I don't know, but continue.
I think some aspect of it is, for example, if you look at where these criminalities are thriving, they are thriving in areas where there is complete absence of governance in terms of at the local level. What has local government been delivering in terms of service delivery, to the people in the last couple of 20 years in Nigeria? Literally nothing. And even local governments in cosmopolitan areas or metropolitan areas too, what are they delivering? All you see, for example, you see touts stopping pickups and other vehicles, on the road, on the highways, to collect tolls from them. Where does those tolls even go to? So we need so much of creativity and innovation, in terms of how we run things. We need to change practices, because if you are faced with a threat and you want to deal with it, the most important thing is to understand what that threat is and what your own practice is, and then try to change your practice to beat the whole thing, because it's all about intelligence. The criminals have their own intelligence network, so the state too have their own intelligence network. So the state must be able to mix its intelligence as well as with governance, to deal with these issues. There is a limit to which the army, the police, and even the paramilitary forces can do. And I will boldly say it, because we are already overstretching them because of the absence of good governance at different levels of the nation. So it therefore becomes very important that we try to get our governance right. We try to get our politics right. I mean, it is in Nigeria, for example, you find the near complete absence of elite consensus. And I'm happy that the vice president mentioned that there is an elite silence over what is happening there. But what we need more than ever before is elite consensus, because the elites in the country are the major beneficiaries of the largesse of Nigeria. So if they can't get their acts together, for example, to have an elite consensus over issues of security, over issues of poverty, and over certain issues to continue to maintain themselves in power, then what they are begging for is they are begging for the usurpation of their powers through non-constitutional means. Because if you look at, for example, in the Northeast, when the Northeast crisis happened and when the Boko Haram crisis happened, when they sacked areas, for example, they sacked Mubi and all that, the first thing they did was to remove all the forces of all the structures of the conventional state system, even remove even the traditional rulers, and establish their own kind of system. So it means that they are much more creative in how they deal with things. Yes. So if we need to move, we need to bring our intelligence. The military, they have good brains. DSS have good brains. Paramilitary, they all have good brains. But what we need is to change our approach in terms of our governance approach and even our operations and planning. The army must have learned a lot of lessons. It is Boko Haram that made them to bring bike battalion, to begin to confront Boko Haram in the Northeast, when they knew that Boko Harams were more flexible and much more mobile when they used motorcycle. So they too change their practice to bring in a motorcycle battalion, to do the same thing. So we need to be creative. Conflict provides opportunity for change. So we need that opportunity to change some of our practice to get some things right. We can't continue as usual and think that we'll get the same result. If you bring in emergency and the practice is still the same thing, we might get worse conditions because of unintended consequences of a state of emergency. Well,
you have indeed said it all, being creative in the way we do our things. Just a few days ago, the governor of Niger State cried out, that a part of Niger State has been taken over by Boko Haram, and that they have hoisted their flag in that area. If that is true, then what you have just said is very, very pertinent, because they are creative, knowing full well that when they take a place, the next thing is to establish their own government in the place to run the affairs of the area, and that means that they have completely taken over the place. In any case, let's bring in Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu one more time. I'm really, interested in this issue of declaring state of emergency on security, because as the situation is in the country presently, it does appear that that's the only thing we can do to see how we can stem down the tide of criminality in this country. What is your opinion on this? And if eventually the government declares a state of emergency on insecurity in the country, what do you think should be the steps to follow? I may not have an opinion, but some Nigerians could feel that, look, we need to confront these individuals head on, you know, because what they're doing is physical. If we don't, like El-Rufai would say, look, no negotiation, we have to clear them. If that's what we will do if we declare state of emergency, what is the modalities for such? That is, if you believe in that, aspect.
Thank you very much. Building on what the previous guests have spoken about the state of emergency, we have to look in terms of security, in concrete terms. What does state of emergency do in terms of security management that is not obtained under normal times? In concrete terms, what state of emergency does, it concentrates power in the hands of the executive. Like we know, in the normal times, power is shared between the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. But when you declare a state of emergency, the other two branches of government are surrendering even some of their powers to the executive to allow him to act decisively, swiftly, and if necessary, even secretly, to confront security measures. So there are certain things which under normal times the executive will not be able to do. For example, if the president wants to budget some money for security issues, under normal times he has to go to rule the National Assembly. So here I come back to what Mr. Habila was saying about need for equipment, need for personnel, which has been an over. We know all it's there. But all this thing at the bottom line is finances. When you have a security, you have a state of emergency, it will enable the president to identify wherever funds are and direct them to the security issues without necessarily waiting for legislative approval. So this is one area where security emergencies will come in handy to free the hands of Mr. President or the executive branch to do whatever is necessary. This may include even curtailing individual rights and liberties. As in the International Code for Human Rights, there are situations under emergency that some rights could be derogated, except, of course, maybe the right to life. All other rights can be curtailed. The president could impound, some property. He could they could monitor media or even private communication and so many things. However, there are always fears that in emergency, the executive branch may overuse its powers. But in all modern democracies, including Nigeria, there are checks and balances. For example, even when the decision of declaring the state of emergency, there has to be imprimatur from the National Assembly. There is also the need for periodic review. There's a time lapse after which a certain time, I can't remember what's in our constitution, after a time when the emergency has been triggered, there has to be a time where it will lapse until it is renewed, again with the consent of the National Assembly. So there are checks and balances that will enable the executive to act swiftly and conveniently, but then without overreaching the powers. Now, what I want to see is that it seems we are all aligned, both the legislature and the executive branch, that the security we have on the ground is not fit for purpose. What we are asking our military men and policemen and intelligence personnel to do, we have not given them both the human and the financial and the economic resources. Now, here I'm happy to what my other colleagues said about elite consensus. At least we can see consensus from the executive and the legislative branch that something needs to be done. And what is that? State of emergency. Now we want to see this backed by action. When you compare what Nigeria, despite our size, despite our population, despite our unfortunate security challenges, what we are spending on security, pari passu, other states that are surrounding us, when you look at what they have, their own economic stand, in all honesty, Nigeria is very low in what we are spending on security. Now, again, I'm always an advocate of more resources, but I'm also an advocate of following the resources. And even at the family level, if you give maintenance allowance to your family, unless if God blesses you with a God-fearing wife, if you don't follow up, You may give 1 million naira as maintenance allowance, but then your children may not be well fed. So what I am saying, the National Assembly, both the Executive and National Assembly for that matter, when they release these resources, they must have ways of checking that the resources are used where they are supposed to be. We know where our security forces are hurting. We know what they need. The money should go there. There is tendency over the years to go for white elephant projects that add nothing to the capacity and the operational efficiency of our district. I hold both the executive and the legislative branch responsible for that, because they see every item that is budgeted for. So, and it is not only arguing about how much, after how much you follow, so that the Nigerian taxpayer has the good value for his naira and kobo. So I want to see that, please, that we have arrived at this junction where we agree. I have to commend the National Assembly, because normally a state of emergency will be initiated even by the executive branch. Here, we have the legislatures telling the executive branch, please declare a state of emergency. In other words, we are even ready to surrender some of our powers to enable you to tackle the security challenges. I wish us the best of luck.
Well, Group Captain Sadiq, very well stated. As you've also heard from the other guests, there are a number of matters arising, and you have also touched on those matters arising with regard to the declaration of a state of emergency. Many more points to consider. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll get back to our guests. All right, you're welcome back, and still Good Morning Nigeria, live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. All our guests are still with us, and of course, it is part of generating consensus on positive action to be taken to drastically reduce the level of insecurity in the country. Let's bring in again Honorable Bamidele Salami. One point that keeps coming up is inadequate personnel, inadequate logistic resources, and so on and so forth. And yesterday, while we had the part one of this conversation, that matter also came up. Say the police, we keep saying the police, they are around about 300,000 or 320,000 as an example. And there are also reports that about a third of those personnel are on duties that are not strictly policing, except that many persons have taken advantage of it, and there is some mercantilism, as one of our guests said yesterday, in all of this. So you have policemen who are doing VIP protection, very well stashed uniform with guns, and then they sit down in the offices. They don't patrol their beats. Nobody is there, to protect the citizenry. One of our guests also pointed out that years past, the MPU was a feared outfit. That's the mobile police unit.
Yes, please.
What we call MOPO, a feared unit, and it served as a buffer between the regular police and the military.
Exactly.
So that you drafted the anti-riot police into situations if they got out of hand before you brought in the military. Today, everybody's just lumped together. Some of them, you see them, we have seen photographs, probably some of them with Asians, carrying an umbrella, to cover them at our public expense. And then we keep saying that we don't have adequate personnel.
Yes, you see, we're a country that plants tomatoes and hope to reap maize. Talking about the personnel, even apart from the fact that we have, people who are deployed to very critical areas, to operate, thereby thinning out even the little personnel we have, we also have to consider the process of recruitment into our security agencies. What percentage of the present members of the armed forces, the police, the DSS, the civil defense is actually fit for that job? Now, we carry on, in this way. If you look at what happens even in some other countries of the world, even if they don't have the strength in terms of the number, they have the strength in terms of the logistics and the equipment. And that today, in the technological-driven way, is even superior to the number. But today, when you want to recruit into the police, into the civil defense and everything, we all sit down somewhere and share out slots. People who come into the police only because they graduated and they don't have a job. Not because they have a passion for policing. Not because they have the stamina, the intellectual wherewithal to go into the security agencies. You employ somebody into a secret service without the necessary aptitude and the strength and the character, only because he has somebody with a green or red barrel recommending him. That's the only thing that brings him in. Right. So these are problems that we all have to confront, because we have refused to go the path of sanity as a people. I'm talking like this because that is my conviction.
You're saying the elite class, not the people, not the
yeah, of course, it's the governors, the government of the country, the people who are in leadership position that are responsible for this.
Yes.
And this is why there should be a charge on Mr. President. He is the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of the Republic of Nigeria, for God's sake. He needs to do far more than what we're having. It's not about a Garba Shehu or Femi Adesina coming to talk to Nigerians. The president at a time like this needs to be more upbeat. He needs to be seen. He needs to be heard. He needs to charge the process. He needs to come out and declare the enough is enough on some of the legislation that we have. No amount of resolution or law or whatever that comes from the National Assembly will go anyway if the president himself is not ready to stand up and see the threat ahead of us and confront it. And like I said, okay, we are talking now about immediate solutions. Now, there are other long-term issues that we need to confront with. The issue of education, like we mentioned. In most of the states where you have all these bandits going into the forest today, these are the places with the highest level of poverty in Nigeria and the highest illiteracy level. Those are the places where so there is a direct correlation between education, between economic well-being and insecurity. And the times that we are today, are times such that people cannot even feed well as a people. All the monies we are voting into social investment programs, where are they going? How many people are actually receiving these monies that are meant to serve as a buffer for them economically? So these are all the issues that we have to tackle together as a people, not only to nip the present problem in the bud, but to prevent even the larger one that will come ahead if you continue like that. And like I said, the buck stops on the table of the president. He is the father of the nation, the leader of the nation, and we expect him to come out and do far more than what is being done today, so that it will be recorded of him that at the time when he was president of Nigeria, he saw a problem and he solved a problem.
All right. All right, it's well stated. Let's talk about the issue of, inviting mercenaries or rather seeking foreign assistance, to assist Nigeria in ensuring that we stem the tide of criminality in Nigeria. Just a few days ago, the president called on America, an American government, to relocate the African headquarters from Stuttgart, Germany, down to Africa. And you may recall also that when Boko Haram started, that there was a call by certain individuals for Nigeria to allow the U.S. or any other country wishing to assist us to come in. But then the army chief said no to that Nigeria is capable of handling our own internal insecurity matters. But today we have seen that it is no longer that way. Now that the president has called for AFRICOM to come to Africa, for them to, because if it's meant for Africa, why stay in Germany? Come to Africa, relocate in Africa, and then see how we can benefit from their assistance. Is it a possibility? I'm talking to Habila Joshua. Is there a possibility that if AFRICOM comes down to Africa, assuming we say, okay, come to Nigeria, we'll give them a space in Nigeria, how would that play out, in terms of fighting insecurity in Nigeria, if that is allowed to take place?
Well, if Mr. President have decided to say so, then the intelligence and information at his disposal must have indicated that. And so if we're arguing, we should be careful to look at that there must have been some intelligence, there must have been information intelligence that warrant that. And you can also see that because the morale of the security agencies, whether the military or the police, is being dampened because they're hunting for them and they are hacking them down. And when you do that, you create a situation where a lot of those who are supposed to stand up and have the gallantry to face what is coming at their face, their morale will be dampened. That is one. Two, I'm sure that it's going to, if they come, they are not coming to take the job of all the security of what we're doing here, but they are coming to strengthen And then some of the things that we've not done, they may likely do. They may also come in with equipments and logistics that will enable us to fill in the gap. Like I said, I have followed keenly some of the arguments and some of the reasons that are put across by the security agencies and the military. And they've always said they need more equipment. I have been to Operation Lavia Dole. I've been to the flashpoints, whether it's in Yobe, or it's in Meduguri, or it's in Zamfara, or it's in Niger, or it's in Benue. I have truncated those areas, and I've had sufficient time, and I know that equipment and more personnel have been the problem.
What kind of equipment are we talking about here? Is it the AK-47?
Whether the helicopters,
armored carriers, is it the helicopters,
personnel armored carriers. If you have a personnel armored carrier, you will be able to go into where people are even shooting, to be able to take down those who are doing what they're doing.
I don't know. Well, thanks, DIG. Sometimes there are also economic benefits to these issues. We're going to go to Group Captain Sadiq Garba now to also speak on the AFRICOM idea as well as getting the mercenaries. But let's also point out, because when we're talking about getting equipment, getting logistics, and so on and so forth, certain countries around the world normally use occasions such as this to drive their military-industrial complex, where you can repurpose industries to help you produce this. I know that there's a factory somewhere in the southwest, I think it's Shagamu also, that produces APCs, and I've seen the APC displayed here in Abuja. You know, you say, look, this is what you're going to produce. And Namco produces trucks. You can reconfigure your assembly line to help you produce, you know, some of this. Not that you will say National Assembly will appropriate money now. I don't know, maybe it runs into billions, and the next thing, oh yeah, everybody goes out, you know, to go and bring this in, and people are still jobless in Nigeria. So that's part of the thing that we also need to consider when we are doing this. Group Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu, let's get your take on the call for the use of mercenaries and the request for the relocation of the headquarters of AFRICOM from Germany to Africa, most likely Nigeria.
Thank you very much. By way of background, we must remember that the issue of AFRICOM coming to Nigeria or to Gulf of Guinea started actually in 2007 when the AFRICOM was established. I could remember vividly in November of that year when AFRICOM was established by President Bush, and they showed their preference to have the headquarters of that AFRICOM in the Gulf of Guinea. Some people say Nigeria, but whatever reason within the region. They recognize Nigeria as an important hegemonic power in that Gulf of Guinea. So, of course, they made overtures to Nigeria to get Nigeria's acceptance for AFRICOM to be sited in the Gulf of Guinea. Later, President Eradua, who was in power at that time, called a meeting of National Security Council, and at the National Security Council, decision was unanimous that it will not be in Nigeria's interest or Africa's interest to have AFRICOM. So subsequently, I think the U.S. government made overtures. They had the interest in Equatorial Guinea, Liberia, and then in Southern Africa, countries like Botswana. But unanimously, almost all the African leaders, as of 2007, felt that it will not be in African interest to have such presence on the continent. Of course, there are issues of our colonial history. Some people see it as neo-colonialism or another form of oppression. So the Americans been very pragmatic. They drew back on hosting the AFRICOM in Africa, which would have been their best option. Because over those years, around up to 2007, beginning with Bush's this thing, if you find all the other continents, Americans have elaborate bases and forces that are dedicated to those continents, but they didn't have in Africa. But with the resurgence of African economy and trade, they felt that they should have a presence in Africa, if not for anything, to counter the emergence of Chinese influence and Russian influence. But with this, resistance by Africa, especially when it was coming just after the Iraqi invasion, African leaders felt that having such a distance will be a prelude to, swamping another country. So the Americans made a tactical withdrawal and took their AFRICOM to Germany. However, Now that this issue has come, we have to ask. I am talking of 2007 and we're talking of now. Like they say in international diplomacy, there is realism. There is also this aspect of there is no permanent friend or permanent enemy, only permanent interest. That was 2007. There was no Boko Haram. There was no ISIS. Nigeria was not having bandits, kidnappers, IPOB, and all the other security challenges. Certainly from 2007 to now 2021, the geopolitical security situation has changed. It is in that reality we have to look. Do we change our position, which has been not to accept the base and take it here? Again, like Mr. Habila said, I am sure policymakers, even though the president has uttered a sentence on that, I think the policymakers, because it is something that has not only economic, it also has social and many other implications when a country accepts. Now, in general, accepting a foreign base is a kind of symbiosis relationship between the country that is sending troops and then the host country. Like somebody again said here, there are issues of economy. There are many motivations that will make a country to accept to host a base. In Nigeria, we had that debate as early as 1958, just before independence, when we wanted to enter into Anglo-Nigeria Defense Pact that will allow the British to have a defense pact. Of course, the nationalists of that time eventually jettisoned the idea and the pact was never signed. Now we have to look, what are those benefits that having American, AFRICOM have in Nigeria? So many...
Group Captain Sadiq Garba, well, I'm sorry we have to really cut you short there because time is beckoning on us to actually sign off this edition of Good Morning Nigeria. And I'd like to appreciate you for your contribution this morning. Group Captain Sadiq Garba Shehu, retired security and defense consultant and expert in Safe School Declaration. Thank you indeed. And of course, we also like to thank member House of Representatives, Honorable Bemdele Salami. We thank you so much. Well, after your meeting on the declaration of self-emergency on insecurity, we'll get to know more about it after that, perhaps on this platform. All right. Dr. Joseph Ochogu, Associate Research Professor, Head Research and Policy Analysis, Institute for Peace and Conflict Resolution, Abuja. Thank you indeed for bringing us to the issue of anatomy of violence in Nigeria. Thank you so much for that. And Habila Joshak is a retired Deputy Inspector General of Police Operations of the Nigerian Police Force. We thank you, as always, because he's always here with us when we bring up the issue of insecurity. Now, we have the Nigeria's representative in the CAF Confederation, Enyimba Football Club of Aba, has qualified for the quarterfinals after beating Orlando Pirates of South Africa by a lone goal in Aba.
All right, so that's it for us on Good Morning Nigeria today. We thank you for tuning in. We're back tomorrow, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, do take care of yourself. I am Kingsley Osadolo.
And I am Kirian Umayo. Have a great day.